I'll tell another part of my life with with Baba. It was 2004, and I was working in North Myrtle Beach, handyman and painting and all that. And I was also working for a man from Charlotte, North Carolina, who had a house right next door to my place on Holly. And we went up to, and I worked for him. He did scuba diving in the ocean for artifacts and stuff from boats and all that. And he would bring 4 or 5 people down. They would stay at the house that he had bought or rented. I don't know whether he owned it or not. And they would do that, and then work would need to be done and stuff like that, and I would do it for him. And one day we went up to the coffee shop on the corner near Holly on 17 there, and when we came out, uh, and I was saying goodbye and walking away from him because he was going back to Charlotte. I turned around and I said, you told me that you have more frequent flyer miles that you'll ever spend. And I said, do you think you could loan me some and get me to India and back? Think about it. Well, within 4 or 5 days, the secretary from Charlotte called up and said, when do you want to go? And it turned out that I used up 440,000 of his frequent flyer miles over the next 5 or 6 years. So that was a real Baba gift, beyond. And so when I got there on the fourth on the on, so, gee, it was yeah, it was November 2004. Um, and I was going out to Marizod frequently, and Steve Myro would accompany me on sometimes, and we would walk with Mirwan all around the property. This is before all the changes came down, and we would always walk away just totally blissed out. And one day I came out by myself and took the bus out, and walked down to that entryway there. It's about a quarter of a mile walk. And I was sitting down outside the blue bus, and Marilyn came over to me and and started talking, and I was I don't know I was complaining a little bit. I think I was really frustrated in the last week or so too, that I came out almost every day and I could not get up Seclusion Hill. I would go about 50 feet and I'd stop. And I'd sit down on a rock or whatever, sandy there, and just contemplate, you know, and I'd leave and I'd come back down. And that was a gradual progression all the way up to the top. And this particular day, I had gotten as far as the little ledge, the little 2 or 3 foot ledge that takes you up onto the top of Seclusion Hill. And when I came down, Mirwan was waiting. Mirwan was waiting for me, and came over to me, and he put his hands around my back and touched the base of my spine, and I really literally got zapped with an energy I I had only experienced, 20 years earlier. That just went up and down my spine. And I looked into his eyes and I saw Baba's eyes, and the voice that came out of Marilyn's voice is, "Come and help." And so when he backed off, I, I told him, well, I'd like to, before I make any decisions about that, I'd like to go up to Seclusion Hill. And he said, oh yeah, go up, talk to the Lord, he said. So I went up there and I got up, got up on the top of the hill and walked all the way down to the end overlooking Mirazad itself. And I sat on a rock and it was comfortable. And I had a really good talk with the boss, and told him how I felt about it, and uh, how could I possibly do it, and all that stuff, and kind of got a little angry at one time and laughed another time, and it was in the process of this time period. I was up there a half hour. I um, turned my head to the right, and a glint in my right eye drew me to a little crevice. I had talked with Baba about, remembering the time I was with the Franciscans, where poverty, chastity, and obedience was what you vowed for. I had taken those vows, and the glint when I reached in was a coin, and Baba, that to me, Baba was saying, "That's no problem. You know, you will come and help." And as this conversation with Baba continued, I looked over on my left and I saw some cotton threads that were uh, sticking out by a bush, and I pulled out the threads, and I ended up with a foot and a half or 2 foot rope, and on that rope were 3 knots, and those 3 knots to me were same as the vow I took back then of poverty, chastity, and obedience. So that was very clear to me. And I started really to sob. I think it's a feeling anyone would have about all that was happening. And I ended up finally getting up and walking back down slowly, and ended up, and everyone was waiting for me when I got down there. He came over and gave me a hug. And it was quite an experience. And it probably more, I can probably give you more detail if I think about it and go through my mind with it.
Tell them about the rope, symbolized the sash you wore
Yeah,
around your.
yeah, and the rope itself with the 3 knots in the capuchins, they wear a white knotted cord around their waist, and which on it are the 3 knots, and they kind of hang down from the waist to the knee length. And we always wore sandals without socks unless it was really cold. That was a brown robe. It was a hood, and the hood's called a capuche. And there's a monkey called a capuchin monkey, which
It's a hood.
which has the shape of a hood on the monkey's head. Anyway, when I was 19, when all this happened. And my time with the Franciscans at that time, they were called they still are what we call Capuchin Franciscans. Was 1955, 1950, and the 1955 on February 2nd that I left the order and I was relieved of my simple vows just by leaving. And it would take me, if I had stayed, it would take me 7 years more training. And at the end of that training period, I would take solemn vows, the same as the simple vows, but the solemn vows, in order to break the vow, you have to have permission from the Vatican to do so. So anyway.
And what was the date you had?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Jack,
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
early on, you mentioned Steve Myro. Have you stayed in touch with him?
Not really. I've kind of broken all ties with India. I mean, as far as people are concerned.
Yeah,
I talked to Patrick Finley.
I met Steve in the early '80s at the Pilgrim Pines, and this was at the Sahavas that was held annually, most likely sponsored by the Southern California Bobbleheader
Yeah,
group.
I've been at them.
And lo and behold, on one of my visits to the Samadhi in India, there was Steve Myro. And I didn't realize it at the time, but years later, I saw him again. And I learned that not only does Steve live there, but he's kind of one of the managers for the operations manager for all of Amartithi.
Yeah,
and he's one of the very, very few people on the planet that wanted to learn one of my tunes. I never heard him play it, but I think it was way back in 2006 that he wanted he wanted the chord progression for "Step into His Holy Fire," and I really haven't spent any quality time with him to speak of, but I do see him from time to time at the Samadhi at Mehrabad.
well, Steve and I were like brothers. And he was my best friend over there.
Yeah.
And,
at Pilgrim Pines, we used to run 5 miles.
Yeah,
he's amazing in that way. I don't run like that anymore. I used to, but I do my
well, Steve's job at Amartithi was to make sure that the the whole area of where the what do you call it, where the performers take place, the stage and that whole area between the stage and the Samadhi was covered in tarps. And he would spend days, unloading the tarps, and had, some of the locals would help him. But
Juanita wants you to finish your story.
What?
Juanita wants you to finish your story.
Yeah. So, where was I?
talking about leaving the Franciscan.
Yeah. So anyway, now the last thing I could say about the Franciscans is that that day, one day it was a Saturday, and I took a walk out to the extreme end of the property, which was up in Milton, Massachusetts. They call it a friary, and I was called Frater, Frate, brother. Um, and I was sitting on the edge, on the property's 3-foot stone um, wall, I guess, and just watching all the traffic going by and all that. And I just said, I'm not happy here. I'm gonna leave. And I just made that decision on the spot and went back and told the priest in charge of the place uh, that I wanted to leave. And he listened to my story, my feelings and all that. Said, uh, we could take you tomorrow morning down to the railroad station in Boston, which they did. So that was how I ended up. And of course, I called my parents before I came back, and they just kind of fell out of the bed, I guess. You know, family, mom and pop having a son that's going to be a priest is a highlight of their lives. Um, that feeling that they had for me was replaced by my sister Kathleen, who was younger than me by 4 years. She went into the Dominican order, and she was followed by my younger sister Carol Ann, who went into the Maryknoll order. And it was there that Carol became a good friend of Ed Flanagan, who was going through his process of becoming a priest at the Mother House up on the Hudson River. All this interconnection continues to amaze me. Anyway, another life story. I'm not very good at this. Forgive me. Used to be. Yeah. So anyway, I came back on 2005 and wasn't aware that Fallou was involved with Marilyn in replacing who was another Bible lover that was working out of Arizona at the time. And when I got back in 2005, I went in to see Fallou at Marilyn's request, and Fallou told me that I was not going to be working out at Marizod. And I didn't say anything. I just kind of looked at it. And what my mind spun was, well, wasn't I told this before I even came here? And I realized later that Paulo was in another world. So that evening I called up Marijuana, and Marijuana asked me to do the final editing on the discourse. So I ended up doing that. I ended up staying at Marijuana in the PC 12 years.
Every 6 months.
Every 6 months, 5 or 6 months. Okay, my time is up, and I appreciate you listening to my rather discombobulated stories. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Jack.
So whatever's happening at 10:30 starts now.
You said, love it, doctor.
Yeah. Lord God, help us to love you more and more and more and more. It's true yet more. Thank you. Come on, them on. Okay. Anyway, I'm signing off.
That was a good story. Thank you.